what's up? It's the Bober and Handley Pro Football Podcast. Just one this week because, well, you know what? Chris, he gets busy. I'm figuring out this whole fatherhood thing. So yeah,
Yep.
so it's been a little different, you know. And if you notice, this is Chris Bober. It's not a different guy.
I know. I got to cover myself up. I'm kind of shamed. I feel naked out there. But life goes on. Andy Reid played. I had the mustache for 6 months. I started to raise money for mustaches for kids and just kept it for an additional
Yeah.
5 months. As a tribute to all the men out there that did mustaches. But it's great. Congratulations on learning how to be an adult and a dad. It's definitely not easy, and enjoy now because they can't talk back. They can't get in
Yeah.
trouble. They can't, wait till they're teenagers and the real work begins.
I've been puked on. I've been crapped on. I've been peed on regularly now. So I feel like I'm initiated, right?
I feel like my teenagers do that to me. It's just not real. It's not literally. They kind of figuratively do that to me.
Well, we got a lot to get to because we didn't have our sort of recap of week 8. We're already in week 9. We saw the Green Bay Packers win last night. So week 9's off and running, but there were some takeaways from week 8 as well. And kind of looking at our best bets, our overs and then our unders, or our underdogs and our favorites. I'll come right out and say, speaking of the team who won last night, where was that against the Minnesota Vikings? Look, the Vikings seemed like they were a team that were ready to sort of kind of look to the future, to try to maybe not stay in a transition for very long. And so they were already starting to kind of free up some cap space and open up that roster a little bit. But as long as you got Dalvin Cook, they prove that they can still be right there with anybody. And that was impressive. I'll tip of the cap to the Minnesota Vikings and beating the Green Bay Packers last week. Just did not think they had it in them.
Yeah, I could not have seen that coming. Dalvin Cook deserves the game ball, obviously. Kirk Cousins didn't do much, but Dalvin Cook just kept them off the field. That was a game of long drives. I mean,
Yeah.
I think in the first half there was like 4 possessions because they were all long drives, and Minnesota ended up getting touchdowns, and Green Bay just didn't convert as well there. And of course, they pulled away. Looking at our best bets, we don't want to step too far and trip over the past too much, but a couple takeaways. From your best bet is Green Bay. This is why I think they're going to be probably one of the top seeds in the NFC, but I'm just not going to trust them against good teams. Minnesota wasn't a good team, but how can you be a Super Bowl contender when you have fall flat on your face? I mean, really flat a couple times against teams that you should win. So that I don't trust them on that side of it. Now your underdog did come through in Pittsburgh, which is very nice. Pittsburgh won outright. It's interesting, that game, because Baltimore absolutely annihilated them on the ground. Really should have won that game if it wasn't for 4 Lamar Jackson turnovers. My best bet of Buffalo came through in terms of a win, but they only won by 3. So at the end of the game, I was rooting for New England to score so that they can go to overtime and then Buffalo could score a touchdown and cover. But they didn't. Cam Newton fumbled, and the consensus going around now is that New England might be tanking to get the number 1 pick or something. Not the number 1 pick, but to get a better pick out there. Interesting take on that one. And my underdogs came through. The Giants covered, almost won that game, and I would have picked them because they had their lineman back. Denver, who was my backup cover or underdog of the week, they won outright too. So underdogs last week were 8-4 against the spread. Minnesota, Vegas, Pittsburgh, Chicago, Cincinnati, Miami blew out teams that they were favored against. And then of course New England ended up covering. Denver came back and covered. Giants covered. The money, Vegas had their best week they've had all year because everyone chases those favorites. So we'll see how the market reacts this week in week 9. But it was definitely an interesting week last week.
Tua Tagovailoa makes his debut, and he won, which is great. Now, I didn't watch this game in real time, but just kind of a lot of the breakdowns of what I was seeing on the NFL Network and ESPN. It was a very pedestrian type performance. His defense did all the work. The Dolphins won, and they beat a good Rams team. And you and I talked about how that could be a tricky spot for the Rams simply because of the travel. You know that better than I do. But I don't think either one of us saw that the Rams would go and basically lose to the Dolphins and that Tua Tagovailoa's debut would be a successful one. It wasn't the Rams defense in this one. It was the Dolphins defense. So as much as Tagovailoa's performance was very meh, hey, he gets the win, and now they're rolling forward with Tua Tagovailoa. And there's a rumor that they might be sort of auditioning him now because they still, it's apparently, according to people close to the Dolphins, they're not necessarily done shopping in the quarterback, even if that is in the draft, which I find to be very interesting because they got Tua Tagovailoa in the first round this year. And if you're already looking for the next guy and the guy's only started one game, what does that say about either Tagovailoa or this organization in Miami?
Well, I mean, how rumors start and what they are, I don't know. I think it's a prove it league, and Tua doesn't have the pedigree to say that he's the guaranteed number one guy that's going to take that franchise into the playoffs in the future. The biggest matchup I saw, and this is where I kind of read about this going into this game last week, was Brian Flores matched up against the Rams. Now, remember, he was the defensive coordinator up at New England when they played against the Rams and got after them in the Super Bowl. So I think most people thought that was going to be a very favorable matchup for that defense against a team that they had seen before. The Rams are very simple. I mean, you have to do a handful of things to shut them down. It's not easy, but they just run the ball wide zone and then play action off of it. So it was a good thing, but we'll see what Tua does. I think Miami scored on defense, special teams, and Tua actually scored a touchdown. So they're a tough football team. They're building. You got to like what you see down there and what they're doing. Maybe not the quarterback yet, but we'll see what happens when Tua gets out there and gets to play in some of these better teams.
Yeah, and the other thing that we're kind of looking at this week, and we saw a little bit of it last week, some COVID issues in the NFL. And, Chris, with the cases on the rise throughout the country, I don't think it's a big surprise. And I think this is where the NFL is really going to have to sort of hunker down. And in my opinion, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this, you knew at some point this season you were going to have maybe a bad week or a bad month with just what's going on in the country right now with COVID. It shouldn't surprise anybody. And this is where I put my faith in the NFL, that they were most likely prepared, that if we did get into sort of a bad month or when flu season and, kind of merged with what's going on with COVID-19, that there could be a lot more positives. The key is to isolate those guys. The key is to, have the contact tracing work for you so you know exactly what you're dealing with, and then you can make adjustments to the schedule if necessary. We saw the Houston Texans have to shut down their facility. We saw the Chicago Bears have to shut down their facility yesterday. It sounds like both teams are on track to still play, but you've got Matthew Stafford on the COVID reserve list. You've got a bunch of other guys on the COVID reserve list that we have not seen this many people on the COVID reserve list. Now, that doesn't mean they have the coronavirus. That just means either they tested positive or waiting for that to be confirmed with those PCR tests, or they are considered to be high risk because of close contact. So just kind of what you've seen this week. I mean, for someone who's followed this as well, and for someone who's played in the league and knows kind of how the NFL operates, are you confident that the NFL has probably had a plan for this and maybe sort of expected this?
Absolutely. I think they really have. And that's why you see them being very creative, and more creative so than we've seen in our society, I think, and in other sports where guys, they're spending the money and the time to test them, to separate them, but they are allowing them to come back to play if they get some positive or some negative test results for a few days, which I think is the right thing to do. I think it's a great model for other places within our country or this world to say that the coronavirus is something that's very real. It has the potential to be very deadly, but it also sometimes the reaction to it is just as deadly. And I think they're trying to walk that line. Now, it is interesting. You saw the Raiders; they're getting fined, and they lost a 6th-round draft pick for very blatantly not following the protocol. So the NFL's serious about this. John Gruden was fined $150,000. He makes $10 million a year, so who cares? But they are.
Do you agree with that? With what happened?
That's what happened. What's that?
Do you agree with the Raiders? Okay, hey, we warned you before. You're not following it, so we're gonna dock you a draft pick. I mean, that's a big deal. Are you okay with that?
Well, I think that it just goes to show that they're taking this seriously, and if they were to, have something bad happen, someone gets really sick or dies
Yeah.
or has a major outbreak because of these protocols, then that really shuts down their business, right?
Mhm.
I mean, it's a hard line to walk between wanting to be free and not be encumbered by masks and all these stuff we got to go through now, and also realizing that if you blatantly disregard these things and cause damage, you are hurting other people's livelihoods. You're costing them opportunities to advance their career, to make money. You could be damaging their health. So the NFL is just trying to really crack down on it because they want to keep playing football, and it might not be. I mean, we watched that game last night. I didn't know most of the people in that game,
No.
and it was a good hard fought game until like, the Packers realized they could have Devontae Adams against who knows who in the back end, and Valdez Scantling scored a couple touchdowns. But get used to it. It's gonna be football. It might not be great football, but it'll be football because they have to keep going forward to keep this thing viable.
Yeah, it is interesting. I mean, in a way, like, and I think that's a good topic right there as a San Francisco 49ers. 3 weeks ago, Chris, you and I were both looking at them saying, okay, I think as they got Garoppolo back, even though he hasn't played well, they got Kittle back from his first injury. They started to get a little bit more healthy, and you saw them put up some really good performances. And I mean, took care of business against the Rams, where I thought they looked really good against. And I started to believe that, okay, the 49ers, they are still, from a roster standpoint, when healthy, one of the better teams in the NFC, and they were starting to play like it. Then they get just dealt that blow again with Kittle, who very well could be out for the year. He's great. Garoppolo, depending on what you think about him, the guy does have experience, and he might be out for the year with that sprained ankle. So you look at, Deebo Samuel's missed time, Raheem Mostert's missed time. You've got guys on the defensive side that missed time, and now you had 4 guys out with COVID last night too. I just don't know how much more they can take and still look at this organization and say, boy, yeah, they still have a path to the playoffs. Now with the expanded playoffs, sure they do, but with the injuries continuing to mount up and the things that they continue to have to deal with on a weekly basis, I don't know how many teams could overcome that. To me, it's just very unfortunate for San Francisco.
Yeah, and I saw a headline that said that they have $80 million in salary cap space on injured reserve, which is brutal. And I think
don't forget about Bosa too. I mean, he's been gone for the year.
Yep, and also let's not forget they lost a few guys too, right? That D line, they lost a few of those guys just due to some attrition and some free agency. So they've got this Super Bowl losers curse that we talked about even before the season started, and they're just dealing with it. But I think we're starting to see teams in this league kind of classify themselves. You have the top tier, which is able to beat any team in the NFL. Then you have the next tier, which is the teams they'll beat the teams they're better than, but might not beat the top tier. They're all fighting over like the lower 2 or 3 wild cards in the league. Maybe a division winner in there, and then you have the rest of the league that's kind of all fighting against each other. I saw, you got to at this point put the Niners down below there and say, they can beat teams that maybe aren't going to the playoffs, maybe aren't very good, but with this amount of injuries, can you think they can beat Green Bay? Can they beat the Chiefs? Can they beat Pittsburgh? Can they beat Tampa or New Orleans? And they're not in that class anymore, especially with the injuries. And it's just a weird year. It's going to be, we have half it over, the other half's coming, and a lot of more crazy things are going to happen. So they're playing football, which is great. It's just a very different environment than I thought about this for a second, just to add, because I know we got to get to this week's games, but I'm hearing things out there about how players are going about their business, and it's kind of weird to me that you hear about guys who are close contacts or not, and you think they would all be close contacts because they're in meeting rooms, they eat dinner together, but they don't do any of that, right? These guys go there and they play football, and then they go and they're all 6 feet apart from each other all the time. They do interviews via Zoom. They don't eat close to each other. They don't go to meetings together. They go to virtual meetings. I'll be very interested to see maybe some sort of documentary about how they're operating, because it's very different football than I operated in. And we were very close all the time. They're not at all. I don't know how it's affecting everything, but it's definitely a different environment. I'd love to see a day in the life of like an NFL player now and see how different it was than when I went through it.
Yeah, I was saying the same thing about college football, and we talked about Nebraska when they started their originally scheduled fall camp before the season was shut down. I said I would just love to have somebody follow a player from the time they wake up to the time they go to bed,
Mm-hmm.
and just see exactly what they have to go through, how it differs, even going to class. And the same thing in the NFL, as you experienced. It's pretty amazing. Yeah, I mean, you hear about, I was watching the news about the Chicago Bears with one of their offensive linemen, and then another offensive lineman was considered to be high risk because of close contact, which, as you mentioned, that makes sense. Those guys are going to be around each other. Well, how wouldn't the entire offense be affected, or how wouldn't the entire offensive line be affected? Then you find out the space that these guys adhere to when they are in meetings or doing Zoom meetings. When they work out, they're regulating and making sure they're monitoring, station to station, how many, no more than two guys at a station at a time. And those stations are very well spaced out. All those little things like that. It is kind of remarkable that if we do, and hopefully that's very soon, get to a time that we can look back on this and say, wow, that was just so crazy. I'm with you. I want to see and hear just how those minor details were altered and how they had to be followed throughout the course of a season, because I think it's just very fascinating.
Yeah, it should be interesting and to see how this all plays out.
Real quickly before we get to games, I got to ask you, speaking of locker rooms, so the big story this weekend is Antonio Brown will be making his debut with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Chris, I don't want to sound over dramatic when I discuss Antonio Brown, but I got to a point a year ago where I said, this is not diva wide receiver behavior. This is a guy who needs help. This is a guy who's not mentally there, whether it's CTE or whether it's just a guy who's just kind of nutty. He's a guy that can't help himself. He can't stay out of his own way. All he had to do was remain quiet for 3 days, and he would got his full guarantee from the Raiders. He couldn't do that. The guy just can't help himself. But now Bruce Arians introduces him into that locker room environment with the Tampa Bay Bucks. He's staying with Tom Brady. Tom Brady, speaks highly of him. He vouches for him. I get all that. And I think as long as they're winning, you're not going to have a problem. And I think Antonio Brown physically helps them to be a better football team. My question is, the first sign of trouble, whether that's a losing streak or Antonio Brown is not being utilized the way that he wants to be used, is this potentially a dangerous thing for a team that seems to have things already figured out?
Well, I think that they had to weigh all those options. Every thought that we've talked about, I'm sure that they've mulled those over in their mind, had meetings about it, whatever they needed to do. I think that the way it ultimately came down was that they believe that his talent is so superior that it's worth the risk, right? And the risk to them really is if it can kind of deteriorate any of their culture. But they got a very veteran locker room, right? That receiver group has a lot of veterans over there. They really feel like, and they've asked them, they're okay with sharing some of the catches and some of the touchdowns and some of the things like that. They're really focused in on a championship, and that's what they say. Let's see how the Antonio Brown factor comes in, because he has now been a positive factor for quite a while. But and I remember I was talking to one of my son's friends who was like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe he did this and did that." I said, "Listen." He's like, "Why does he get a chance?" I said, "Because he's that good. He really is. He's the best receiver we've seen in this league for a decade, honestly. If he still has that kind of things, then it's worth the risk. As long as they can protect their culture, protect any sort of fabric from being turned in." And you remember Tom Brady is a guy who can control that locker room, done a good job of it. Not the nicest way of doing it, but he will say his mind. And you just got to watch out for any cracks in there. Because I think that I'm very sure that they put stipulations in the contract that allows them to move a direction at any moment without much risk to them. So I think they're just going to kind of keep a monitor on it, and he's going to come in with a bang. Let's just, for their sake, let's just hope he doesn't tear that thing apart.
Yeah, Bill Belichick and the Patriots, first sign of trouble, they removed him. We'll see if the Buccaneers, if it comes to that, maybe it won't come to that. But I think you and I could both agree on this. If he cannot make it work here, with having the support of Tom Brady, with having this already pretty good structured organization that's ready to win now, if he can't make it work here, I mean, can we just say we give up on Antonio Brown? It's not going to work anywhere.
Yep, I think he's this is by far the last chance. There's a lot of people who don't think he should have even been given this chance. So there are some some things he has to get through. There's some legal stuff that's still out there too.
Yeah, that's
But
true.
I think they might have timed this up right to get through this season without that they're really coming to a head just yet. And we'll just see. We'll see if he's as good as he's been and if he can play nice.
So week 9, again, we saw last night, it was the Packers. They were in control of this game, and they should have been playing a depleted 49ers roster. They win 34-17. So they get week 9 started off on the right foot. So now we kind of look at our Sunday games. And, Chris, I'll start with the Chicago Bears taking on Tennessee because, first of all, the Bears, we don't know what their offensive line is going to look like. We do know, and it has been confirmed that they will resume practices today. So it sounds like the little COVID scare that they had, they were able to contain that. That's good news. The bad news is their offensive line has already been shredded with injuries. They might not have Cody Whitehair again. They might be down possibly to 1 or 2 actual starting offensive linemen. This is a team that they struggle to keep Nick Foles upright. They struggle to run the football. But the good news for them is if there's a weakness with Tennessee, their defense all of a sudden has just become a sieve. And Chicago's defense, they can slow down the run. And, Derrick Henry's very good. So, I'm looking at this one. I see Tennessee as a 6.5-point favorite, which I think is probably the fair number. I'll be honest, I don't know what to expect out of Chicago. I think it looks really bad for them right now. But for Tennessee, I'll say this: I'm not as high on Tennessee as I was 3 weeks ago.
Oh, I'm right there with you. In fact, this line it started out like in the 5s, but it went back up. I can't believe that it went back up to 6.5. I'm seeing 6.5 out there. If you got it at 6.5, I love the Bears in this spot because I think it's Tennessee has been kind of exposed for who they are. I expect them to bounce back. I expect them to probably win this game, but they aren't as good as we think they are, especially on defense. And the matchup here is Chicago's defense against this Tennessee offense that they can ground and pound, but they've been very poor in the red zone. And that's where Chicago excels. So I expect this to be a close game. I think it's a pretty good bet on Chicago. If you get Chicago at 6.5, I think those, given those points, I like Chicago here. I don't think they win the game. I think these are two teams, honestly, that have kind of been exposed to not be at that top tier. I think they're in the middle tier, right? They should beat the teams that they're better than, but they're going to struggle against good teams. The problem with this game is they're both very even, I think, as far as potential. And I think with these two teams, it's a very even matchup in that sense. I think Tennessee does win, but I think Chicago covers.
Look out for this one, too. If Nick Foles goes down, don't know who's going to be playing quarterback. Mitch Trubisky in L.A. getting his shoulder looked at. He played one snap, Chris, in the Saints game.
One snap?
His shoulder's banged up.
Yeah. I don't know how that happens. He plays every snap for years, and he's fine. Then he plays one snap and gets hurt.
Yeah, so we'll see. Seahawks Bills. I think this is an excellent game. And you look at the Seahawks favored by 3 points. Look, for the Bills, I don't think they're invoking the same kind of confidence and conversation, at least on the positive level, that they did in the first 4 or 5 games of the year. And remember, it was Tennessee when they had to sort of wait out Tennessee's COVID issues, and then Tennessee just blew them up. That's where we maybe saw some warts exposed for the Buffalo Bills, but they're still a solid 6-2 right now. They're still very much, in my opinion, in control of the AFC East. The Seahawks, kind of a similar situation. Defensively, they're not very good. But when you look at that very competitive NFC West, they are in control of that division right now. So I think this is going to be, for a noon game, and any other year you would have said, hey, Seattle Buffalo, are you excited about it? I'm like, no, not at all. I think this is one of the better games of the week.
I do too. It's interesting. There's a lot of factors in this game that are coming to light. Right? I think Buffalo's in a good spot finally being home. They're not rushed. They had a really weird schedule for several weeks.
Yeah.
Playing on Mondays, Tuesdays. They played in Kansas City in the rain. But I think the thing that's been exposed with Buffalo is their defense just isn't as good as we thought they were. That team was known for their defense, and they've lost guys, and they play good at spots, but really they're not playing that great on defense. Now, Seattle's they think they're getting Jamal Adams back this week, which will be a huge help back there. But Buffalo's going to have to pass the ball to win this game because Seattle actually is decent at stopping the run. So I look for this to be kind of a shootout, honestly. I wouldn't be surprised if Buffalo gets out to a lead, but then, Russ starts cooking and we start seeing touchdowns thrown all over. I mean, my gut says Seattle's a good pick at 3, but I also like the law of averages to know that at some point traveling that far is going to catch up to them. So I'd stay away from betting this one. I'd lean towards Seattle a little bit, but it should be a lot of excitement in this game.
Can Josh Allen, in your opinion, now see we get these games every now and then where there's a quarterback that has earned the conversation that Russell Wilson gets in the MVP conversation. Remember at the beginning of the year we were saying, hey, Josh Allen is playing like an MVP quarterback. Now that has sort of subsided a bit. Could this be sort of that reintroducing Josh Allen to maybe not the MVP race, but reintroducing Josh Allen to still being a good quarterback because all the attention is going to be on Russell Wilson in this one?
I think it is. He's going to make some plays in this game. The defense is, Seattle's defense isn't that great either. The difference in Josh Allen and Russell Wilson is, of course, experience. And Russell Wilson is more of a master of his craft, where Josh Allen's kind of a bull in a china shop. Is going to be the turnovers, honestly. If Josh Allen limits his turnovers, he is one of the better quarterbacks in this league, but he just has a tendency to turn the ball over. And we'll see how this game plays out, because there's going to be big plays. But for Josh Allen, are they going to be positive or are they going to be negative?
That's without question the best noon game. Let's talk about your Kansas City Chiefs, though, also playing at noon. They are hosting the Panthers. They're a 10.5-point favorite last I've checked. There was one part of this season, and it's amazing to think we're already halfway through, one part of the season where I thought, Panthers, you know what, they could be a tough out. And maybe I would have looked at this game and said, Chiefs, beware. I think, again, the Panthers have sort of started heading back down to that road that we thought that they would be pretty much the entire year. Now, the one thing, though, to keep in mind, we could see Christian McCaffrey back in the lineup. He might be ready to go. So if you're a Panther fan, you may not be looking at this game as, hey, we could shock the Chiefs. But not just Panther fans, but fantasy owners, Christian McCaffrey coming back, always very exciting. So if there's anything about this matchup that is at least tilting towards the Panthers as far as excitement, maybe that's it.
That definitely could be there. The Panthers, my assessment of the Panthers is that they've done a good job of building a team with good young players, but they haven't done it long enough to have good quality depth. So they are experiencing some injuries on the defensive side, and it's exposing their lack of time to build up the roster like they want. So Bridgewater's a wild card in this game. Of course, McCaffrey coming back helps him, but at the end of the day, Kansas City is just so well put together. I don't think it's going to be a huge deal. They're also calling for high wins in this game. So a lot of people are saying that the overs are a little too high. If you can get this thing in the mid 50s as an over, you might look at betting the under, because they think that there's going to be a lot of wind. And the Chiefs, if they get in a position where they don't feel comfortable throwing the ball, they'll just run the ball and they won't score a lot. So Chiefs should win this game. I don't know if I take 10.5, but they should win this game. Carolina's who they are, We know
it's supposed to be windy here. So, 180 miles south of us, should be windy on Sunday as well out there at Arrowhead. Lions, Vikings. Matthew Stafford on the COVID reserve list right now. He still could play. I think the Vikings obviously are very excited with what they were able to pull off last week. Can they duplicate that? Now, the thing is, Chris, I think, unfortunately, if you're Kirk Cousins, what we're realizing is the best formula for the Vikings' success is keeping the ball out of Kirk Cousins' hands. And that's what they did last week against the Packers. And if you want to get back into this, then remember, this is an expanded playoff year. The Vikings aren't done. They still are playing the Lions. They still have some opportunities. They play the Bears in 2 weeks, which is a winnable game for them. Dalvin Cook, man, I mean, just post US, just stamp U.S. mail on his butt and ride him home, right?
Yeah, it was interesting that you would never think the Vikings would be favored after what we've seen from them this year.
Yeah.
Really, because, I mean, even in the game where they won last week, Dalvin Cook was the only real bright spot. And they have a formula to win. A lot of money's coming in on Detroit. A lot of people like Detroit at -4. If Stafford gets to play in this game, I think Detroit's a good pick for the underdog. I mean, I like them as the underdog. I think that 4 points, I think that, either of these teams could win. They're very evenly matched, but I think 4 points is too big of a spread for either team to do this. I think it's a closer game than that. It's in the Dome, so, weather shouldn't be a factor, but I just think that Detroit's a little bit better position if Stafford comes in. Now, Galladay might be out of this game. I think he's out. So that's where that line moved. It was at 2.5, went up to 4. But going up to 4, if Stafford plays, Detroit, I think, is in a good spot to cover as an underdog in this place.
Broncos, Falcons. Atlanta is laying 4 as a favorite against Denver at home. I think Atlanta's playing a little bit more carefree football. They were so tight early, and we saw those blown leads. But the Broncos, that was a good win for them last week too. This one, I actually almost side on the favor of Denver. If you asked me right now and said, "Hey, just pick a team, who do you think wins this one?" I feel more confident with Denver than I do Atlanta.
So do I'm going to stay away from this game because the Julio Jones factor. Since Julio Jones has come back, Atlanta's actually looked like a good football team. It's amazing what a superstar player will do to alleviate problems within your team.
Right.
He makes their defense look better, right? He's such a great player. But Drew Lock's playing good. He's out there doing his Fortnite dances and whatever he does, which is weird because we're twice his age, so we don't get him. But I think this should be a good game. Not a super highlight game, but I don't know which way to lean on this. I would probably lean towards Denver, as long as we're not overreacting to Denver playing so well last week. We'll see what kind of team they are, if they can, have a steady, consistent effort, or if they're going to be an up and down team.
I thought Seahawks Bills was probably the best game. I still do, but probably the one right behind it for the noon slate would be Ravens Colts. Baltimore needs to get back on track. They're 5-2. I'm not trying to say that their season's on the brink, but I just think you lost in a sort of a heavyweight matchup to a division rival. Now you play an AFC, I won't call them a rival, but an AFC team that is also looking like they're heading towards the playoffs with the Colts. Colts have a very good defense. That's the one thing we talked about. Pittsburgh, if they were going to win, their defense would be the difference in this one. They would try to make Lamar Jackson one-dimensional. The Colts are also very capable defensively of trying to slow down Lamar Jackson and really try to neutralize that offense. So I think this is going to be a huge test for Baltimore. The big difference for me comes down to quarterback on the other side, though, with Indianapolis. Philip Rivers, it's another guy you just can't always trust. Love the experience, love his leadership, but I just don't know if he and this offense for the Colts is a good matchup for the Baltimore defense.
This is a fascinating game, really, because Baltimore, by all rights, should have beat Pittsburgh last week. They really had a great game against them. They just turned the ball over. Lamar Jackson fumbled twice. He threw 2 interceptions, threw a pick 6. Other than that, Baltimore wins that game by a touchdown. They played good. Now, coming off of that game, they got some things out. Now, Marlon Humphrey's out. He's got the COVID or tested for it. And there's 7 other players that are in the protocol right now, and they're good players, all defenders. They're probably all going to play, but Marlon Humphrey, their best cover corner, is not. Now, that changes things up. Now, they also lost Ronnie Stanley, all-pro tackle, broken ankle. They haven't been very good against the rush, and they lost those things. What the Baltimore Ravens love to do is to play man-to-man coverage and bring different exotic blitzes, right? Guys being out and Marlon Humphrey being out might change that. But the other side of it, you got a Colts team with Philip Rivers, who is very good against the blitz. He's one of the top quarterbacks in the NFL against the blitz and man cover, and also man coverage. He knows how to beat him. He has experience. He is not afraid to throw the ball into man coverage. And doing that has been very fortuitous for him because he draws a lot of penalties and he gets a lot of big plays. He did that at San Diego forever. I don't know. I kind of like the Colts here. I really do. I think that they have a very good defense. Darius Leonard's back. They're getting healthy. They're getting receivers back. Baltimore's trending the wrong way, even though they're probably the better team. But I think Indianapolis is trending the positive way and isn't that far off. And don't get this mixed up a little bit. This is a rivalry. Let's not forget Baltimore and Indianapolis with the whole, Ravens leaving. There's a lot to this. It's such a big rivalry. With the Colts leaving. They won't even put the Colts up on the scoreboard there. They do not like the Colts because they left Baltimore. So this is in Indy, so it's not as big of a deal, but there's a little bit of history there.
I'm looking at the under in this one too. I know it sounds crazy with Lamar Jackson and Philip Rivers likes to air it out and get crazy, but yeah, I don't know. The under, for some reason, this thing could get really sloppy. Here's a better question about
the 48. It went up to 48, so that might be some.
Yeah, gosh, I don't know. I kind of like the unders, but it might be crazy to say that. Better question. Worst game, Texans, Jags, or Giants, Washington?
Oh man, those are those teams we talked about in those tiers. Those
Yeah.
teams are all at the bottom tier. So they're all kind of fighting for draft position right here. But I have no idea what we're going to get in Jacksonville. Houston's the same way. Jacksonville, they're playing a quarterback who I don't even know his name. They're playing a guy, right? And then, Houston, you just don't kind of trust them. Now, on the Giants-Washington game, it's a little bit different, I think, because those teams actually are in contention for the division. They're in the NFC East where maybe 6 wins the division.
Last I checked, Bober, you and I are both in contention in the NFC East.
I think the Giants are in a tough spot coming off of a very kind of a big letdown in the Monday night game. They in a lot of ways deserved to win that game, but they didn't. And we have Washington now favored. I think it's 2.5. It's hard. Which team is worse? I don't know. But I think the Giants as the underdog are a decent pick in this game because Washington isn't very good either. And the Giants are playing good football. I just don't know how much they have in them. Joe Judge has them playing in a good spot. I think they're building on a good future. Daniel Jones, if he can just stop turning the ball over and get a little bit more accurate, can do pretty well. The Giants' O-line was banged up, but they held up against Tampa. So I don't know how they play this game, but I lean a little bit more with the Giants, especially on a 2.5 or 3-point spread.
Afternoon games, there are some really good ones. I want to start with one that I don't think is going to be so good, though. And it's just because the fact that America's team, and this does not sit well with Jerry Jones, is a 14-point underdog to the Steelers. And we don't know who they're going to start at quarterback. It's either going to be Garrett Gilbert's, former Texas Longhorn, who was playing in the XFL this last spring, or it's going to be Cooper Rush, who I believe is out of Central Michigan. Don't know anything that he's done. Andy Dalton is not going to play. Obviously, Dak Prescott is out with that really bad leg injury. The Cowboys, defensively, they were already a mess with Dak. Now their offense is a mess. This is just the question more than anything is, does Mike McCarthy survive this? I think he should, because a lot of these, losing your starting quarterback is bad, and he's not calling the defensive plays. I get it. He hired the defensive coordinator, but a lot of people talking that Mike McCarthy's going to be a one-and-done in Dallas. I don't know if I buy that.
Well, again, not to give too much time to a game that shouldn't be very good, but Dallas, I think most of these teams, in all honesty, should get a pass because, he hasn't had a chance to build that culture and build that team. He's been a good coach for a long time. Yeah. So, again, I don't know what's going to go on in Dallas. It's interesting, but not an interesting game to look at, really.
I'm not going to take the Steelers to 14's a little too rich for my blood, but they should cover. Yeah.
They're 6-1 against the spread. They're saying that's not even big enough. So Vegas might take a hit on this one.
I think Raiders-Chargers is sneaky good because I think the Chargers are probably one of the best below 500 teams you're going to face. Justin Herbert's a good quarterback. Defensively, they can do some things. The Raiders, we've talked about this many times, Bober. You just don't know which team you're going to get. You don't know which Vegas team is going to show up. They had a really good victory last weekend. But who knows with the Raiders? But I do think that this game, and it's really right now from what I'm seeing, is an even spread. It's a pick'em. So you look at the Raiders at 4-3 and the Chargers at 2-5. Not usually do you see that type of matchup a pick'em. So, but I think it's appropriate.
Yeah, I like this line when it came out at 2.5. I like Vegas as an underdog. They're very good as an underdog. Another thing that's coming out that I think that's worth looking at is the over. Right, both of these teams really love to sling it, and neither of them kind of play really good defense. But this thing could very well be a shootout. I would not be surprised if this is like a 38-35 game because both these guys can do big things. So I would, if you want a best bet, take the over in this game. Right, it's in, it's in great weather. They're going to be fine with all that. It's indoors, or at least the roof might be open in LA. But the over at only 51.5, I think is a big number, but I think it's still a good number. And if I had to pick, I would lean towards Vegas. I think they're a better team. I think that they could make a run here, where I think the Chargers are just more of like a let's shock the world and try to knock off as many people as we can.
I honestly did not think I'd be excited about this next game ever in my life. The Arizona Cardinals and the Miami Dolphins, but both those teams are teams that you can very well see in the postseason. The Cardinals, we've talked about them a lot, Kyler Murray and the Cliff Kingsbury system. And now you've got another young quarterback making his second start with Tua Tagovailoa. We mentioned it wasn't, statistically a great game for him, but it didn't need to because the Dolphins defense was so good in that one. Arizona is a 4.5-point favorite, but I honestly, This is going to be my underdog pick. I'm taking the Dolphins to cover this one because I do think the Dolphins they're ascending a bit right now, with or without Fitz. Now with Tua Tagovailoa, I just think the Dolphins have a very good defense, and I think the culture is a very positive one there in Miami.
And this is one of those games that, for Miami's sake, I wish they still had Fitz playing.
I'm kind of with you.
I think they can go to the desert and play well. I don't trust Tua going on the road. Arizona on defense has actually played decent recently. They've played very good teams. They played them well. Um, the line at 6 was better than the line, I think, at 4.5 now. I think at 4.5 Arizona might be about right. But we're gonna see, I don't know if Miami's going to come out and do what they did last week. They're not going to score on special teams and defense again.
Yeah.
Got a hard quarterback. So I think it's a tough matchup. I liked it better at 6, but if that's your underdog, Dolphins are playing well. Flores is a good coach. I think it's a tough spot for Tua to go out there and play. And I think it's a hard matchup for the Dolphins defense, which is good, but Kyler Murray breaks all trends.
Yeah.
Now, he's been inconsistent, but that's the matchup I want to see, is how Kyler Murray can do against a good defense.
The Sunday night game is a good one. We talked about Antonio Brown returning now with the Buccaneers. He will make his debut on Sunday night against the Saints. Look, the Saints, even though they won against Chicago last week, I think there's more questions than answers for that team, and a lot of it has to do with just guys banged up. Now, it does sound like Michael Thomas does return. That's huge for Drew Brees. That's huge for the Saints. I hope that is the case because you want to see this matchup where both rosters are at full strength. The Bucs finally getting their assortment of weapons back healthy. Now the Saints starting to trend into that direction. We saw that the Saints and Bucs earlier this year went in the direction of the Saints, even though most people said, "Oh, the Bucs seem to outplay them." I get the feeling that is kind of bugging New Orleans. They won the game, and people were kind of talking more trash about New Orleans and still propping up Tampa Bay. So, the 4.5-point spread, I think, is a good one. I think Tampa Bay is the stronger team, but having Michael Thomas and adding another element to this offense, I think is something definitely to watch in this game. So I think this potentially could be a fantastic Sunday night matchup.
Oh, I think it's almost guaranteed to be a fantastic matchup. On prime time, two of the best quarterbacks we've seen, obviously some of the best of their generation. I actually like New Orleans in the underdog spot here because I think they're getting Michael Thomas back. They're supposed to get Sanders back. They're not dynamic on offense, but I think that kind of helps them because they don't get in trouble a lot, right? Their O-line's playing pretty well.
Yeah, Kamara's been awesome.
Well, in these fast linebackers, David and the other guy that's super fast ironically, they're not great cover linebackers, right? They're good field side to side, making tackles. They're not great cover. I think New Orleans holds their own here. I also think that, so I think Drew Brees is going to have a good game. I think Michael Thomas and Sanders back helps. I think Kamara's the X factor. I love it because he's on my fantasy team. They're giving 4.5 points. I like that. I actually think that, honestly, I think the Buccaneers win this game. And the reason I think that is because Tom Brady is so good at situational football, right? If you look at how good he was for New England, he didn't always blow teams away, but you give him the ball with 2 minutes left in the second quarter or the fourth quarter, he's always going to score. He's always going to get you in the end zone and the red zone. He's always going to convert good third downs. He's great at situational football. And if he gets the ball at the end of this game, they go down and kick a field goal or score a touchdown and win. And I think 4.5 is a good spot. I would take New Orleans in that spot. I like them a lot, but I do like Tampa to win the game. I just think they win it by like the Giants game. Maybe they score at the end, but I also think Tampa's coming off a short week, a physical game against the Giants, and I think New Orleans is coming off a bye.
They beat Chicago.
They beat Chicago. But this is a very even. I think it's more even than the 4.5 point spread. So yeah. I think it should be a great game. I would take New Orleans in the underdog role.
Yeah, one thing to watch that you brought up with what New Orleans is doing, Kamara in the passing game, that was a killer against Chicago. And we can talk all we want to about Chicago's weaknesses. Their defense is not one of them. And Sean Payton able to scheme Kamara up against linebackers, being able to find that matchup. And Kamara that's where he has really excelled, in my opinion. So if that is a big factor, I think that bodes very well also for New Orleans as they continue to add more weapons. The Monday night game,
We don't got to spend a lot of time on that. I mean, honestly, the Patriots have got so
Patriots and
much
the
work.
Jets, the worst team, and a team that just all of a sudden. Are you watching Cam Newton throw the ball?
You know, I never liked
Something's
how he
wrong,
threw the
man.
ball. He's not accurate. He's not a cerebral. He's more about like momentum and running the ball. And I don't think that wins. I don't think they're built to win that way. I don't think they have the right personnel to win that way, and they're just not good. The interesting
I don't think he's right. I think something's wrong. Like when I'm watching him short throws, like throws that I think high school quarterbacks make. That all of a sudden he is shorting. Like I don't think he's right.
But here's the deal, though. He's always been like that, though. I mean, just the way he throws the ball, he's meant to run the ball around and just take shots. You know what I mean? He does not have the accuracy to hit running backs and tight ends and crossing people short. He's just not accurate like that. He's a big arm with a big body that can run. The interesting thing about this, there's people speculating that Belichick could be tanking, right?
Yeah.
Like that to lose this game to the Jets would be more beneficial because then they don't let the Jets get Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah.
So there's that to think about. I would not put it past Belichick to do anything, right? So if he thinks he has a future in there, he might be tanking for a better draft pick. There is money coming in on the Jets at 7.5. I don't know how that can happen because the Jets are still that bad, but it's a rivalry game. I wouldn't touch this one. I don't even think we should be talking about it, but yeah, we'll have to maybe gut through that, kind of like we had to gut through last night's game. But
yeah.
Okay.
By the way, my favorite, I did not give you my favorite. I am going to take the Chiefs in the 10.5.
Okay.
I feel like them at home against the Panthers. It's a big number, but if this was 3 or 4 weeks ago, I would have been very hesitant. But I just feel like where the Panthers are heading and where what we know the Chiefs are, I feel good with that one. So my taking the favorite is going to be the Chiefs laying 10.5. My underdog, as I mentioned earlier, though, I'm taking the Dolphins to win straight up, but I'll take the 4.5 points that they're getting against the Cardinals.
Nice. All right, so my underdog, I'm going to pick the Raiders. I think the Raiders in the spot. It's a pick'em game, so you can put it wherever you want here. And I'm torn between taking New Orleans as a best bet or Chicago. Right, they're both underdogs. I don't like many of the favors this week. I just think
Chicago is good against the spread. If they're a favorite, don't ever take them.
Yeah. Okay. You know what? I'll take Chicago at Tennessee. I'll take them under. I'll take them getting the 6.5 points. I think that's too much. I think it's a good game. I don't think Tennessee is that good. So I'm going to go with Chicago and Vegas for my best bet. They're both kind of. I guess you could flip them around. I'm going to take those two. And you got the Chiefs, and you got who do you have besides the Chiefs?
Yep, I got the Chiefs as my favorite, and I got the Dolphins as my underdog.
Awesome. All right. Well, let's see how good we can be. My best bet finally did not come through, at least in the points. But we did get underdogs in there. So, should be good football this week. Couple duds out there, but a couple really good games.
And keep our eye on the COVID situation. That continues to be a fluid one with teams, how that could impact. Of course, when you're making your fantasy football lineup, that's a big deal. And also, if you are putting in your bets, I highly recommend waiting until Sunday morning because those things could dramatically change based on who is and is not available.
Well, the only thing I'll say about the betting lines is they tend to overreact. And if you can get in on a bet when you're very positive guys can come back, that's a good place to be, I think, because I think sometimes stuff comes off the board or stays high. Where, like, for example, like I think with Detroit, I think Detroit's a good pick this week as long as Phillip Rivers comes back. -4. Or get Detroit +4. If Rivers is going to, Stafford. If Stafford back, I think they're in a great spot there. But you just don't know that. So very interesting for that and for fantasy football too. But I won again last week, so I'm 5-2, I think, or 6-2. So
good luck to the Elkhorn Antlers against Waverly because the last time those two teams played, it was Junior making a big stop at the end there to erase Waverly's drive, right?
That's right. He had a good stop on 4th down. So playoff time, baby. We got to go win. So it's a very even game. Whoever makes less mistakes, I think tonight's going to win the game.
And playoffs in the 70s in the state of Nebraska, you got to love it.
Yeah, I'll take it. I'll take it. So, all right, man. Have a great week. Look forward to next week. See if our bets came through. We'll see you back early next week.
All right. Sounds good, man.
Bye-bye.